Here's some ideas you never heard before. Some business secret weapons that we have in store. It's Laura Hodgson, NowCorp CEO, with some action ideas to help your company grow.
Hi, I'm Laura Hodgson, President and CEO of NowCorp. Welcome to the Small Business Secret Weapons podcast. Every day, small business owners traipse off to conferences and listen to speakers give them advice on how to grow their business. And unfortunately, most of the advice is the same, and most of it is not very actionable. In this podcast, we are focused on those secret weapons that small business owners have used over time to grow their business that never get shared when you're at a conference. We're lucky today to have Maria Foxhall with us from Pivot Global, and we're going to talk specifically about some of those nuggets that she has learned in the course of working with thousands of businesses to grow more sustainably. Maria, what I'd love to start with is the name of your company, which is Pivot Global, because the word pivot is a very interesting concept for businesses. We hear it all the time, but I'm not sure we know what it really means. In basketball, when you're pivoting, one of your feet has to stay in the same place. Otherwise, it's called walking or traveling. The other foot, however, has to move so that you can get off a better shot or get off a better pass. How do we apply that to a business?
Thank you, Laura. That is an amazing answer, and it's great because when you're pivoting as a business, you do have to stay planted. And so we chose that name is important because most businesses, as you know, are in survival mode. And so part of our job is to understand that mode and then help them pivot to a thriving mode so they can thrive. So not to change the balance and what we call the baseline of the organization, but to help them move into a position where they can thrive versus just in survival mode.
So do we think of a pivot as something you only do when you're in trouble or your business is struggling, or is pivoting also a way to grow?
Excellent question. It can be done in both. When you're in survival mode, you absolutely want to make sure you can understand where you need to pivot. When you're growing, you want to sustain your growth. So to make sure you can sustain that growth, most people think that I'm growing,
I'm good.
it's okay. However, to sustain that growth, you always need to be aware of what's happening, not only internally, but externally. So we take a look inside and outside. So we did inside out approach and outside in approach to make sure that clients, based on what their goals and objectives are achieving that and are now thriving and continuing their success.
You know, as a business owner, I find that some days I get so caught up in the day-to-day of my business. And if things are going well, the last thing I'm thinking about is changing anything. How do you advise a business owner to identify when, even when things are going well, a pivot may be something to consider?
All business owners have been told since they were in college or in high school or when they start their business by their business advisor that their business plans are organic and they always need to be reviewed. Same thing here. In order for you to continue to thrive instead of survive, you should always take a look at your business plan and where you are in the industry. So take a look at trends, take a look at what's happening in sales, really gives you the vision to make sure you will always know when you need to pivot.
So, you know, it's interesting. Yesterday I was meeting with a client, and this particular client, when we met them in 2015, was doing about $300,000 in revenue. What they told me yesterday is they will do $20 million this year. Can you imagine that? In less than 4 years, from 300,000 to 20 million. And what's interesting is, in not those same words, I think they said the same thing. They said every year they step back and look at where they've come from and where they're going. And in their case, it's all good news. It's all growth and profitability. But they also, each time they do that, think about different scenarios.
Yes.
And are things out of their control changing, or are things in their control changing? And they force themselves to think about that. So how do you help businesses that doesn't come natural for?
So when we do when we engage a business, we assess where they are, and we do a complete baseline assessment on where they are. And we take a look at, as I mentioned, the outside in, inside out, take a look at what's happening in the market, which will gets them to the point where they're comfortable, where they're beginning to see that. So we help businesses really take a look at that and understand that, because if you don't take a look, you're just in survival mode.
Right.
And it's a scary process.
Sure. It
Because
is scary
now,
to look at yourself.
Exactly. So we spend a lot of time encouraging businesses to take a look inside and out. So because every business has competition
Right.
to some degree. But if you're not taking a look, you're in survival mode and things are good. But at some point, if the economy turns down, then
Right.
what? So the key is to prepare. So we help businesses prepare for those next levels, whether they're doing extremely well or whether they're just in survival
Right.
mode.
Which is interesting when you say prepare, because if I were to tell you right now that a storm was coming, you would probably run to the grocery store and buy milk and eggs. Even though we live in Atlanta, we still think you're supposed to do that. And if your house was in the path of danger, you would board it up. But as business owners, I don't think we necessarily know what to do to prepare. And as we talk about pivoting in your role as Chief Revenue Officer, one of the biggest areas of pivot is sales. How do you pivot in terms of who your customers are, developing a customer, maybe reaching out to a customer you never thought you would have in an industry you never thought you would serve? How do you think about sales and customers when you're trying to pivot your company?
Great question. So I'll give you an example of a client that we are working with, and their focus initially, was they have a durable medical piece of equipment that they use. They sold really well in hospitals, and they grew as fast as far as it could go. It was really just for children, but it's a pain management product. So in today's industry, the opioid crisis is huge, and this customer, before they became a customer, came to Pivot and asked us about what could they do to expand their sales.
So this was really all optimistic. How do I grow my market?
Exactly. And so when we took a look at it, we took a look at where they were, their plan, and then we helped them understand. Well, first they told us, we asked them, where do they want to go? What's your new sales go? Who do you want to do? Where do you think your product fits? So we started with that baseline assessment I told you about, and then we helped them build out a sales strategy that within that strategy built out their target market for customers. They are a local company that does business nationally and internationally. They were doing business in 29 countries, good in some cases, not so good in others. But we helped them devise a plan that worked for them, that allowed them to pivot to a different target market. So from just hospital sales to durable medical equipment companies, to insurance companies who cover workers' comp, to wellness companies who are now looking for ways to mitigate pain without using opioids, using a piece of equipment. So this particular customer knew they wanted to change and knew they could only go so far in the market they were in, and so it was great. Another quick example is a company who didn't quite know, but by the time we spent time with them, they were growing extremely fast, doing really well. But we had a conversation, and one of our consultants realized that the product they were selling fit in another market. And so the client was very engaged. Was, wow, we were doing well, but however, that is a market that we've thought about but never knew we could enter. So depending on the client, that dictates where they go, and that's how we get. So it's really just a conversation around where you want to go and really understanding what success looks like. Because
and that's important. It's interesting as our economy is potentially entering a phase of change. I think this conversation is very timely in that anyone can step back and start to prepare today.
Yes.
And whether you engage someone to help you do that or whether you do that on your own, the important thing is to do it. Yes. To take a day, take an hour, take an afternoon, step back, look at your business, and it might look great, but ask yourself, if things were to change, how do I prepare?
Exactly.
How do I think about a pivot? How do I think about either pivoting operationally for more profitability or pivoting from a sales and revenue perspective on other potential markets? But the key is to prepare and then be ready to pivot and know which direction you're going to pivot in.
Exactly. Perfect
And-
summation.
Fantastic. So thank you for joining us today on our Secret Weapons podcast. As you go about the rest of your day and the rest of your week and the rest of your month, please do step back, look at your business, prepare, even if everything's going awesome. Think about what you would change to be awesomer or to address changes that might start to slow your business down. And if you can do that and be ready to pivot, then as Maria said, you can not only survive, but you can thrive. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you on the next Secret Weapon for Business podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. For more Secret Weapons podcasts, please join us at nowcorp.com.